program will be being presented by the Indy Dental Group. Indy 500 veteran Dr. Jack Miller and his wife Dr. Liz Lewis have a phenomenal practice. They're now up to 6 offices. If you need dental work, you think you haven't had any check lately, you need to check them out. Give them a call, make an appointment. The number is 317-846-6125. Their main office is at 92nd and Meridian. It's easy to get to off the interstate. If you need dental work or you haven't had a check them out. Need insurance? VP Insurance is the place to go. They're located at 5004 West 16th Street, about a mile straight west of the Speedway. You can talk to Mike Pardee or Tom, find out what you need, they'll help you out. And I've been with them for over 30 years, and every time I check, like the insurance commissioner says, they're the best. Give them a call, the number is 317-248-0070. SVRA, what a phenomenal organization it is. They got the F3 and the F4 series now, run by Scott Goodyear. They have brought back the Trans Am series to bigger than what it used to be. It's phenomenal. Want to find out where they're performing or what events are? Go to svra.com and you'll be glad you did. They got sports cars, vintage sports cars. They got the Trans Am. They got the F3 and the F4. They got a full weekend when you go see them. A couple things I want to mention. Much to the upsettedness of people, I'm still here. And part of the main reason I'm here is there's a guy sitting at a table over here in the white hat who has been here. This is his 70th year here. His name is Paul Bryan. He talked me into coming to the Speedway in 1964, and unfortunately for you, I'm still here too. And his wife started coming, Kathy started coming about the same time. So those of you, as you go out the door, if you're unhappy with me being here, he's the guy to blame for it. He's sitting right there. This is an extremely interesting evening because we have 33 people in our group, and 14 of them that have come on Thursday nights. They're all here, all except 2. My brother on his way from Chicago, and he left an hour and a half ago. I said, you won't make it. But we're ready to go, and I'm going to start off by introducing the gentleman sitting next to me. I have been friends with him for over 60 years. He's not happy about that either. He was the first driver to talk to me when I took over AutoSport and did the filming. He's the first guy who would talk to me. He was driving the purple People Eater number 8 purple race car and started out at Trenton, New Jersey was the first track he talked to me. And over the years when I was doing a radio show in Western Illinois, I'd call him on the phone to get what's going on, and he'd talk to me. He's been around for a long time. He spent better than 30 years at the Speedway. He was a driver, team owner, had cars starting in the front row, and he had a career that's out of this world. He's the one and only. Please welcome Mr. Dick Simon.
Does this thing work?
No.
Then I have to correct Don a little bit. He doesn't remember. Basically, I met Don the first time when I wanted to go to Indianapolis, and I was involved in super modified racing in Utah, and Billy Foster, Art Pollard, and Jim Malloy, and those guys were all competing, and they went to Indy. I broke my back in parachuting and wasn't able to come until a few years later. When I did come in 1970, I had bought a Rolla Volstead car for $12,000. Can you imagine buying an Indianapolis race car for $12,000? That's what I had done. And Rolla basically said to me, now Dick, you have to understand, I have 2 of them. One, I'm going to put the champion of the Formula A cars in it, and the other I'm going to sell to you. And he said, I'd like to help you with an engine, but I can't, because he said, I've got to take it for John, and you're going to have to work out your own engine. So long story short, I come to Indianapolis with a borrowed engine from Dan Gurney, who had seen me run the super modifieds and seen me run the Formula A's and the Chevrolet that I drove in the sports car. And when I went to him and asked him for help, he said, well, Dick, he says, you know, I can't gift it to you, but I can loan it to you. And he said, but how are you gonna pay me at the end of the race? I said, with the prize money. He says, well, you might not. Bear with me, this is a little long of a story, but the timing is important, so that you all follow the whole program. So what happened is, I arranged with Dan that I would take out a mortgage on our home if I didn't make the race. He said, that's good enough for me, I trust you, here's the engine. He said, there's one problem, Dick, it's last year's engine. And he said, it's the one I used in the race. And he said, it has 508 miles on it, and you're gonna need to overhaul it at least by 600 miles. So that meant that I couldn't do a lot of practicing or a lot of running with it before we'd have to overhaul it. Actually, we did a little more than I should have. We were up to about 620 laps when I did get qualified. But after I got qualified was a major problem. How do I overhaul the engine? I didn't have the money.
What kind of engine was it?
What kind of?
Yeah.
At that time, I believe, Rodger asked me what kind of engine was that. Well, I believe it had to do with Foyt engines because at that time, I went to AJ Foyt and I said, AJ, I got this engine from Danny Gurney and I made the race. Congratulations, he said, I saw you did. And he said, what can I do for you? I said, well, I need some parts. I need to overhaul the engine. And so he turned me over to Howard Gilbert, who was his key man. Howard gave me a list of parts and how much they'd be, $7,000. So I'm going, oh hell, how do you spend $7,000 to overhaul an engine? I was thinking it was like what I had in super modifieds, you know. You could do it in your back garage for $500 or $600. So I got a very rude awakening, and I'm scrambling like hell, and this guy comes to the door, and he's standing there while I'm on the phone, and he is saying, or listening to me talk on the phone to Howard Gilbert. And I said to Howard, Howard, listen to me, give me the parts, I'll find the money somewhere. And he said, okay. He said, I'll talk to AJ. He talked to AJ, and AJ said, yeah, give it to him. So he gave me the parts, but Don was sitting there with his, whatever that thing was you used to talk into, and and he walked over and he said, excuse me, but I just overheard a conversation. And he said, you said you need $7,000. He said, you know, I'm a member of LaSalle, is it? LaSalle, Illinois. What was it, the Chamber of Commerce? Or it was one of the clubs. And he said, I'll go ask them if maybe they want to get involved. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, maybe you have to bring the race car up there and, you know, we'll do a promotion after the race. And I said, oh, well, yeah, sure, of course. At that point, $7,000 is facing me. And I said, see what you can do. He came back the next day with a $7,000 check.
I wish I had it today.
Well, and I've never forgotten that because I don't know where I'd have got the seven. Anyway, what basically happened after that is we did run the race and we blew a turbocharger during the race, and we still finished 14th after blowing a turbocharger and coming into the pits. I remember jumping out of the race car. The guys were starting to pack up, and I said, what you doing? And they said, we just blew the turbo. I said, no! Now you have to understand the yellow flag was out, and so cars were going slow at this point. I leaped out of the car, ducked my two hands in that bucket of 5 gallons of water they require in the pit area, and I pulled it out, started taking the turbo off, and the crew looked at me like, you're crazy, get back in the car. And so they chased it real quick, and I pulled out of the pits, and that's how we finished 14th at the end of it. And actually, we took that 5-year-old car that had never made a race at Indianapolis in 5 years, and we put it in there, and we made the race, and we finished 14th. And thanks to this man right here, that engine ran the whole way, and not a problem.
And the only,
And that's why they call it the good old days.
and the main reason it ran that way, I had nothing to do with putting it together. Oh yeah, he did bring the car to LaSalle. And there's a big old, it's called the Kaskaskia Hotel that's about to fall down now. It was almost ready at that time. Brought it in the lobby and there was a slew of people there and they said, "Start the engine." I said, "You think you want to do that?" He said, "Well, all right." Damn near blew the building down. Jeez, that thing roared in there and the windows shook.
Yeah, but you had the fire department there.
Oh yeah. And I had the EMTs in case I got hurt. I was a little nervous. My next guest sitting on the edge of the table is somebody that probably 2 or 3 of you might know. He is a part-time pastor. His
We all
father
know.
is a 2-time winner, should have been a 4-time winner early on without any question. And he is my first co-host when I started this program. I got to town, I saw one going on, I said, heck, AutoSport would be better than that. So somehow I got a hold of Rodger. He had a minute where he slowed down and I caught him. I said, "How would you like to be a co-host on a racing program?" He said, "You'll never do it." I said, "Well, I'll sell it, you'll never sell it." I said, "That wasn't my question. Will you do it?" "Well, yeah, okay." So I called him the next day. I said, "You ready to start?" "What the hell, you sell it?" "Oh, yeah." "Oh," so he was with me when we started. He's still around. He still talks to me as well. I don't understand that either, but he came here from California. He does follow the series, a number of races every year, and he's just been a good friend all this time. Please welcome Rodger Ward Jr.
And I want to say that the quality of Don Kay's friendship, if I go on about it, I'll get a tear in my eye, but this is a man, if he's your friend, you've got a friend, and there's no doubt about that.
That's gonna cost me 4 beers tonight. Dick, we're gonna start with you. What got you started in racing to begin with? I mean, you were a ski jumper, you got a scholarship in college for ski jumping, which to me was one of the scariest sports I've ever seen. You jump and you're in the air, and your skis are flopping around, and ooh. But what got you into driving race cars?
Well, actually, what happened is, as a young boy, my mother had multiple sclerosis and my father owned a bakery, and my mother was dying, and so I was helping the family with hospital bills and everything, working at the shipyard while I was in high school. And I couldn't take up the regular sports because I worked at the shipyard from 3 o'clock till midnight, and then cooking donuts for my father in the bakery at 5:30 in the morning until 7:30, and then I'd go to school and everybody would want to sit next to me because I smelled like a donut. So not being able to do those,
You still do.
not being able to do those sports, the coach said to me, "Dick," he said, "the high school has a ski team. You should take up skiing. That's on weekends. You don't work on weekends." I said, "Okay," so I took up skiing in my year before the senior. By the senior year, I won the downhill, cross country, slalom, and ski jumping events. And getting a 4-way scholarship then came from it in a university that was putting together a team that we won everything. He put a hell of a team together for that college at that year. And I was their guy, the 5th guy. And the reason he chose me is I was fairly decent in all 4 events. And when you add that together, if a ski jumper fell and lost his points, because in college they took the top 4 combined, and then they averaged that, and whatever school had the best 4. And so in ski jumping, you had the champion from Holmenkollen, Norway, had the downhill champion from Canada, and so forth and so on. He had me from Seattle, Washington, to be the 5th guy that did all 4. And that way, if the ski jumper fell, my score was good, and so forth and so on. So then, when I was in college and out of college, I was sitting home one day and I saw the Golden Knights putting a demonstration on at the Parachute Center that was about a mile from my house. And I'm looking it up, and oh my gosh, they're traversing across the sky with smoke bombs tied to their feet. They're joining hands. Oh, I gotta go see what that's about. And I went up there and I talked to a guy named Steve Biljanic, and he said, well, aren't you Dick Simon? He says, the skier? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, what can we do for you? I said, I want to do that. And he said, well, you got to go through a school. I said, what do I got to do? And so anyway, long story short, I did everything he wanted that day, and he said, holy hell, we'll take you up this afternoon if you want to, and you can make your first jump, but we're going to tie you to the static line, which means it opens automatically after the static line pulls it. From that point, I fell in love with parachuting to the degree that we won the championship in sport parachuting, Utah championship, and we were asked to do demonstration jumping and at the local fairgrounds. I was in the insurance business at that time, working my way to be president of the company, and so I was desperately looking for any clientele I could find anywhere to help me be the top salesman in the company. And Farrell Papworth at Salt Lake City Fairgrounds came along and said, would you guys put on a demonstration jump? And I talked to him, and he was willing to pay us $2,000 back then, and so that was a lot of money. So I said, you bet, we'll be happy to. So we landed after flying around the sky with smoke bombs in front of 6,000 people in the grandstands. At that point, he said to me, he says, you know, the crowd gave you a standing ovation. During intermission is when he was talking to us. If I asked the crowd if they want to stay over to see you guys run, would you guys take 4 of you, take the race cars if I get them up here and run us a 10-lap race? And he was looking for something to give the crowd. Well, at that point, I, of course, looked up all those people and said, yes, give me the microphone. And so we did that. We put the demonstration. And I crashed the car. I felt really bad. Basically, I drew the straw for last, and in drawing the straw for last, I had to start 4th on the outside. So after about 8 laps, I got tired of running in the back because they wouldn't move out of the way. So that's when I learned how to nerf somebody out of my way. And so I won the race. And I would have run the race, except the last guy that was in front of me slid out in front of me. My wheel went over his wheel, and I went over the wall. And that's back in the days when you and your father, everybody was racing anything we could get our hands on. So it didn't mean anything. I just went down to the pits afterwards and said to the gentleman, I said, I feel so sorry you loaned us the car. I said, but that was so much fun. I said, how much do these cars cost? He says, well, in the condition it's in today, Dick, $1,000. And I said, well, what were you going to sell it for? He says, well, I'll tell you a story. He says, my wife and I are divorced. We're having court on Monday. This is Saturday night. We're having court on Monday. There's no way I can fix the car. He said, if you want to give me what it's worth today, I'll just tell the court that's what it was. No, that's not fair to your ex-wife. So why don't I buy it for $2,000? So I bought it for $2,000, and I crashed the next 4 races with that car to end the season. That's when my partner and I decided, I had gained his brother, Steve Biljanek's brother, Mark, and he became my partner, and we ended up buying a Mickey Thompson engine and a Grant King, who's locally here. You know, everybody knows the history of Grant King. He built the cars that Billy Foster, Art Pollard, Jim Malloy, and all those guys were running as super modifieds. And so I said to Mark, we got to have one of those. So believe me, the car makes a big difference, folks, because the next year we won the championship, 20 out of 21 races. You talk about a surprise. The first few races, I had a standing ovation. By the middle of the season, I had a semi-standing ovation. By the end, the last 5 races, they were all booing me. So, but anyway, the parachuting is what got me started in the racing.
Rodger. What got your dad started? will tell everybody here, the guys that his dad ran against that are still around will still to this day say he is the best racer we ever raced against. He was fair. If you wanted to pass him, you had a problem, but he wouldn't do anything dirty. You just had to pass him. And one of the highlights, in my opinion, I think it was at Lime Rock, they had a sports car race, and the world's best sports car drivers all came. This was a huge event. Rodger shows up with a midget. And guess what? He was on the top step of the podium. He beat the world's best sports car drivers in a midget on a road course. What got your dad started?
My grandfather owned a wrecking yard in Highland Park, California, and he told my dad that any of the parts that he wanted off of those wrecked cars, he could salvage, and he started building himself hot rods. And in those days, they had hot rods running on the dirt racetracks in Southern California, and so he built himself a couple of hot rods, and was successful racing those things. And then, of course, World War II came along. He ended up in the Air Force, flying P-38s. He got in towards the end of the war, and as a consequence, didn't ever have to go into battle, but ended up a trainer in Texas. And while he was in Texas, they were running midgets there, and there was a guy that had a used car lot that had a couple of midgets, and my dad would go down and help him work on them. And one day, the guy let him drive it, and the scar that he had that was like a big flap underneath his lip right here, well, he got that the first night. So we know about crashing on the first night. But anyway, so he started midget racing in Texas, and the commander of the Air Force base at the time was the Army Air Force then. The commander said, we don't think that auto racing is a thing for an officer and a gentleman. And as a consequence, I think my father had to choose between driving race cars and staying in the Air Force, and he took the race cars.
And he was, without question, one of the best to watch. And had not a couple of problems with tires, primarily, he could have been the first four-time winner easily, if not 5.
Well, when I tell the story, of course, and of course when we told the story, I mean, one of the races that we won here in Indianapolis, if Parnelli Jones hadn't run out of brakes, he would have been long gone. We won the race down very handily in '59. He killed the engine in the pits in 1960 and lost 80 seconds and still caught and passed Rathman, and that was the closest 500 up until recent history. 61, if we'd have known Foyt and Sachs were going to stop, we could have kept up with them, but we couldn't pass them for the lead. But of course, in those days, all we had was a pit board, and no one knew what was going on, so there was no radio communication. So potentially, we could have won that race. And in '63, we didn't. In '62, we did win. But then again, if Parnelli hadn't had a problem, that wouldn't have been a race for us. I've often said, I think at big races like the Daytona 500, like the Indy 500, like the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the truly big races, I think it's the guy that makes the least mistakes that wins. You're prepared, everybody's fast, and you're prepared to win, but those are the mistakes, either in the pits or on the racetrack, are the things that cost you to win. Dick Simon said something last night that I would like to ask him about. He said, the question was, who was the best race driver you ever saw that didn't win the Indy 500? And Dick Simon said it very clearly. He said, everybody in that race has a chance to win the thing. He says, they all go there well prepared. Nobody goes there with the intention of running 25th. And every single driver, every team, potentially could win the Indy 500.
Well, the reason I said that, just take a look at what Ray Hall's doing right now. Are you saying he doesn't know how to drive because he missed a race last year, and this year he's almost missed a race again? If the other fellow hadn't crashed, he would have missed the race. He wasn't fast enough. And so basically, last night when the question came out, everybody started saying this person, that person, and that person. And I said, no, in my opinion, you've won enough races to get to Indy. If everything is put together properly, you're gonna win the race. And we had our opportunity many times to win with other drivers driving for our team and also for myself, but it didn't happen. So I finished sixth, as an example, in 1987, qualified sixth. Mario and I were a lap ahead of the field, believe it or not. And he blew an engine towards the end of the race, and I ran out of fuel. Came in, got back into the race, and finished sixth. It was our race to win. It was Mario's race to win. It was mine. I still, to this day, say I didn't win, but, you know, it wasn't in the cards. And Raul Boesel, who drove for us, had a chance to win. We had Raul on the front row, and we had Lyn St. James, a woman, on the outside of the second row ahead of 3 world champions. But like Rodger said, it just wasn't in the cards. So we had our turn. It didn't happen, but I just thank the good Lord. And I think back about it. Last night, they had old timers dinner. And one time I was at the old timers dinner, they had 20 chairs across the stage. Last night, they had 5 people there. And that means that what happened to them all? I mean, I don't want to go through each one for you, but 2/3 of them are dead today. Billy Foster, Art Pollard, Jim Beloy, I can go down the list of people I raced with, dead today. Even our own driver, Scott Braden, dead today. So I just thank God that I'm here with you kids tonight, and next to these 2 gentlemen who I think the world of, and just being a part of racing at 91 years old next birthday, I hope I make it another 10 years.
Let's see if that's still working.
Does it still work? Yep. I jerked it right out of the box.
Now, I gotta mention something. ABC used to have a program on television called, That's Incredible. At Riverside, I believe it was Riverside, California, we were out there racing, and I was up on a bridge where they went under. They came out of a turn and they went under, and I was up reporting back how he was doing, what he was doing. He was driving, I believe, for A.J. Watson at the time, and he called on the radio and said, I need to come in, my tire's going. And he said, no, stay out there for 1 or 2 more laps and then you can pit. So he did. First lap he made, the second one he's coming out of his turn, coming down, and I'm standing on the bridge. And all of a sudden a tire, I think a tire blew, and up in the air he went over the fence where the fence was. There was a hill and there was a fence, and came back down, landed upside down. The car was a total disaster. And he said, you'll never make it. And all of a sudden, parts come flying, and he got out. Holy Christ. It was the most unbelievable thing. It's one of the worst wrecks there've been some bad ones, but that one, and the car was it was gone. All they needed was a vacuum cleaner to pick it up. But you survived, you walked away. I don't even remember you limping when you got out.
No, actually, what happened, you were very close, though.
Oh, I was close.
I was
Like
in
from here to
5th.
there.
I was in 5th place, coming on strong, and that's what, if you listen to it, it's, by the way, it's still on. If you Google Dick Simon Riverside, they have millions of people that have watched it. But anyway, it's still on there because when you do watch it, it's, well, I flipped 12 times, 60 feet in the air, hit the ground 6 times, and bounced back up. So there was nothing left of the car, but basically I was 5th place, and there was 7 laps to go. And I radioed in. I've always had a good feel for the car, and so therefore I could tell the tires were gone to the point where I was gambling to continue. I called AJ, a wonderful man, and I said, AJ, I'm so sorry. I know I've been catching the other 5 cars. Yeah, he said, a second a lap, stay in it. And I said, no, listen, the tires are gone. I got to come in. If you come in, we're going to finish 20th. I said, no, I got to come in. He said, stay out, stay out. 2 laps later, the tire blew. And AJ said, well, I'm glad you're okay. I learned a lesson. I'm going to have to listen next time.
If I may,
No.
there are There are two races that you drove in that I was in attendance, and all of the Firestone guys swore that you won those races. The one was the inaugural race at Ontario Motor Speedway. McElreath won that race, got the ring, got the money. The joint was full, it was a great day. But our guys had you a lap ahead of McElreath. Did you win that race and the USAC messed it up? Or is it was just our wishful thinking? Second time, we thought you won at Continental Divide Raceway in Denver.
I did.
You did win that race, and
Yeah.
somehow they gave it to somebody else. What?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
they
what
did.
happened at Ontario?
Well, what happened at Ontario is the track was very sandy. And it had, in California, out there where the track was, it's kind of sand area. So they had a storm that night, the track was extremely sandy. So my eyes, because I didn't wear goggles, which was stupid back then, but that's the case. And I lost my hearing because I didn't wear earplugs in the vintage cars. I do stupid things along the way. But in any case, boy, now I know I'm 91. Where was I?
You were in Ontario on a sandy racetrack.
Oh, yeah, sandy racetrack in Ontario.
No goggles.
No goggles. So what happened when I came in at the end of the race, I tagged the wall with the left front where the crew was, just barely, just kind of brushed it. And they said, what the hell did you do that for? Because it knocked the front of the car over a little bit. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Now, mind you, I was out there running the race car, and when I came in the pits, I couldn't see the wall. So they saw my eyes, they were swelled shut. So they said, you gotta go to the infield hospital. They sent me to the hospital. I didn't get out of the hospital until about 1 o'clock in the morning. Firestone, which you're talking about, came over and told my crew, they lost a lap on you, you won the race. Instead, we finished third, but they said I won the race. So the crew thought, because I was always the first one at the track, and so with the crew, in other words, I'd come right in early in the morning, even though I drove, that was my way, because I also did the mechanics, a lot of it. And I could change my own gears, whatever it mattered. So I always went in as part of the crew. So they expected me to be there the next morning. They never realized was going to be late. So I got there about 8:30, 8:45. Guess what time posting protests happen? After 8 o'clock. The race goes exactly the way they scored it. And so I got no credit for that lap, and the race was given to McElreath, yes. So yes, that was a race, and yes, Continental Divide was my race. I won the race there in a sports car and a Formula A car, and I won it in an Indy car, but they didn't give it to me for some reason. I don't remember what the reason was.
Well, I worked for Firestone, and it pissed us off. McElreath was on good years, I don't have to tell you. Whoever won that race at Continental Divider got the money, let's put it that way. Whoever won that one, they were on good years too. That made us mad as hell.
Yeah, I was so fast in that Continental racetrack. They ran out onto the track and were slowing me down. Remember the rain?
Yeah.
Yeah. They also had a driver or a car get hit. One of the tanks coming into the pits, the big gallons, and that flew into the pit area and hurt somebody bad. I don't know whether it killed him or not. I don't remember. But at that point, they came running out on the track and slowing me down. And I thought, what the hell are they doing? And then all of a sudden they came out with the yellow, and somehow or other in their scoring, I didn't win the race. I don't know how that happened, because I was leading the race.
Yeah. Roger, what was it like, what has it been like to be Roger Ward Jr.? I mean, do people recognize, that aren't necessarily race fans, and somebody says, oh, there's Roger Ward Jr.? Oh, is that the same? Do you get a lot of that?
The Indianapolis Motor Speedway has changed the life of my father, of course, of my brothers, and mine. We being here, being a part of this thing, being a part of this show, knowing guys like Dick Simon, It totally changed our lives in a good way. When I first started my business, I called a guy and said, my name is Rodger Ward. He said, well, my name is Jim Rathman. Well, that meant he wasn't just a car racing fan. He was familiar with races that we were involved in, and was familiar with the 60 race that my father and Rathman were so famous for. So that meant that the guy understood IndyCar racing, and the guy gave me a huge contract. So my life has been improved in every single way, and even the success of our churches, along with my wife being the choir director and me being my father's son. People would come to our churches just to be a part of what we were doing. You know, Indianapolis is a strange place, man. All y'all are kind of weirdos, man, race fans, right? Anyway, so it has blessed me in ways I can't even express.
Now, you started a computer parts business called Forward Electronics. I was at your office one day. I had nothing else to do. I cut the grass, washed the windows, I'd done all the things. I dusted the house and everything. So I come out to your office, and you got a phone call, and all of a sudden you lit up. And you got off the phone and you said, guess what? We just sold our $1 million worth of business. And I said, wow. And he was a little one-man operation in the shell, and he knows computers inside out and up and backward, but he sold computer parts. And he'd be able to buy, in fact, I listened to a couple of calls. He'd buy parts from computer companies and pay a nickel. He'd call the guy if he wanted him, hey, the best I can do for you is 30 cents. Maybe I can get down to 25. I said, gee, that's great. He said, I paid a nickel. Off he went.
Well, that's working on the old 5%, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you and Arie Luyendyk had a conversation last night. Arie drove for you, and on several occasions he felt and still feels that he could have won some races, but you didn't have, you had a Cosworth engine, which was a little bit below horsepower for a Chevrolet. But what was your conversation with him last night concerning what he felt could have happened had you had the right motor?
Well, after I gave my part of the speech, after each one of the drivers up there said so-and-so's name, and then I said, well, any one of them, Arie came to me afterwards and he said, you know, Dick, I did finish fourth for you. And I said, I know, you told my wife when you won the Indy 500, you wished you had done it for Dick. And I said, I'll never forget that, Arie, I appreciate it. He said, well, I'm here to tell you, I could have won 5 races for you. He said the Chevrolet was just too much. And that's why I asked you if you could get the Chevy. And you tried to get the Chevy, and Penske told you that no, I can't put you on the engine program. At that time, Chevy was given by Penske to whatever team he wanted. So if you're one of the players of the so-called system back then you got some of the better engines. I was running the Cosworth engine, and it was underpowered compared to the Chevrolet. And Arie said I could have won 5 races if I'd had the Chevy with you. He said we were a lap ahead of the field in Phoenix, even with a Cosworth. And he said, but then we had a problem, and I didn't get to win the race for you. But he said, thanks for saying that, because he said, I believe, like you, if everything's right, any one of the guys that have earned their way to get to Indy could win the race. It's just they just don't have the combination at the time. They look foolish. I can tell you the easiest race that I ever had was in 1987. I came in and I told my wife, I wish we had another 500 miles to go. And I can tell you the opposite has happened, where I came in and was afraid I was going to pass out before the race was over. That's when a car's not handling, and you're fighting the system. And you look foolish at that point. So basically, to answer your question, Arie basically felt he could have won 5 races for us. When he got the Chevy, he won 2 races.
And one of them was a 500 the year he left you. The
And,
year after he left
he
you.
went to Doug Shearson. He came to me and he said, Dick, I don't want to do this to you, but I put the word out that I'd like to drive a Chev, and Doug Shearson came to me and said, well, you can come and drive for my team. He won with the Chevy. So that's, you know, coming from Arie, I believed him, And I said, thank you, Arie. It makes me feel better. We didn't show it on paper, but we sure were competitive.
Rodger, something that interested me, your dad was kind enough to be on my program 2 or 3 times. And one time he was on with Jim Rathman. We're talking about the race that you're talking about, the close finish. And your dad said, you know, he had tire problems and he had to pull in to get tires. He said, I went back out and Rathman was, but I caught him. But I didn't have enough laps to get by him. And he said, and he looked at Rathman, he said, if he'd have been a gentleman, he'd have moved over and let me pass him, because I should have won.
I'd like to ask Dick a couple of questions. What do you think of the current IndyCar formula relative to the engines, the fact that Honda's considering leaving? What do you think, and if you were the king, what would you design for an Indy formula to run the 500-mile race?
Well, I have to say that I feel that they've done a magnificent job of making it more equal today than back when I was racing. And I admire them for doing that. That's why you've got so many guys, and now a gal, Leggy, which I have to tell you a short story. Lyn was in Phoenix, and she was expecting Leggy, the girl, to qualify, and she called me and she said, I wish you were back at Indy because I know you could help her. So I got on the TV and I was watching the cars qualifying, and on Saturday she didn't make the field. She was the slowest one out of the 4, and so I watched her practicing when they went practice session, and I saw her coming out of the turn and about 10 feet from the wall making another turn, an abrupt turn. And so I said to Lyn, what? Oh, I said to Lyn that, well, I know you're in Phoenix, but why don't you tell her to let the car go free, let it go out to the wall. And the other thing she was doing that I felt was wrong, because a car has stagger, you want a stagger, for that you kids that don't know, take that glass of water, put it on a table, empty, and push it. It will roll to the left. It'll roll to the right, depending on which way you lay the small end. So that's stagger. That means one end is smaller than the other. And at Indianapolis, you run with a solid axle across the rear. So basically, if she is making a turn again, coming off the wall, that abrupt turn could cost you maybe 1/10 of a second. Now multiply that times 4. That's 4/10 of a second. Now, the other thing that I noticed, she was coming off the wall and going all the way down to the inside of the track. Well, wait a minute. The car is meant to go left. So all the way to turn 1, she's fighting stagger. That means you're taking horsepower away from the car, doing its job, because you're making the car go uphill. So if you want to see what I'm talking about, try walking a block with the ground going up about 10 feet, and then walk the same block with it level. You're going to find you get there quicker when the track, or when the ground is level. So basically what I'm trying to say is, if you're going the wrong way, you're just making the hill for the car to climb steeper. So she corrected that, went 231 on that first morning coming out on Sunday, and I almost had tears in my eyes because I felt a part of what, and Lyn told me last night, she said she didn't know how to thank you. But I guess that's what I'm saying. She went from the slowest of the 4 to the fastest of the 4, doing nothing but changing her line on the track.
And I might add that at one time, when Dick sold the team to the ever popular Andy Evans, who was in NASCAR, and he had a driver, Jeff, I forget his name.
Bodine?
Bodine, yeah. And he missed the show 3 or 4 times. So-
5 times.
Yeah, 5.
Well,
that's what I
9.
thought.
Missed.
And he missed the show, so Andy said, can you go down and help him? He said, Dick said, yeah. And he goes down and watches him and realizes that when you go out to qualify, you have a lap. And Dick said, what's the longest way around the track? Up high. What does that do for you? It makes you go more than 2 miles. Give you more time to build up speed. He did that. He brought it to his attention. He worked with him on how to get there. He never missed a show again. He made them all.
What he was doing, what he's talking about is in NASCAR, they, back then as well, they came out of the pit and they came across the start-finish line for the green. So he was actually coming out of the pit because the track's on a bank like that. And he didn't want to risk ruining the nose of the car. And so basically I asked him, well, why are you getting all the way around a turn before you get up on the track? And he said, well, I'll ruin the front of the car. I said, just pull out when you get out of the pits. You've still got part of the straightaway there. Pull out. Well, I don't know if we can do that. And I said, there's no rule against it. Pull out there and you gain your speed all the way from the top. From that point on, not only did he, but so did a whole lot of others. So sometimes your little secret blends off and other people get to take advantage. But there's so much that, being a race driver, I had the opportunity of always trying to figure out how I could take what I had and get more out of it. That's all.
When I first started coming around, I hooked up, after I'd met Dick and hooked up with him, we would come down to Indianapolis, and we'd stay there for the 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I had a restaurant at the time, and we'd turn it over to the people, and we'd come down here and trust that they didn't abscond with everything. And when the guys would go home, Dick would stay, and I'd stay with him, because I was parked in his driveway, and had a small motorhome and parked in his driveway. So I'd stay and help him, and we'd stay there until about midnight, 1 o'clock. Go out and grab something to eat. Go in, he'd go in the house, I'd get in the coach and go to sleep. And that'd be about 1:15, 4 o'clock. What the hell do you want? It's time to go. Back to the garage we go. And I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew tools. And he said, hand me this. He's on the ground measuring, doing everything, getting the car ready for when the crew got there, he'd have it set up. And this went on not 1 day, not 2 days, every day. You get 3 or 4 hours sleep, and back we go to the garage, and dummy me, I'd follow him. I don't know why, I could have stayed in bed sleeping. But having been around him, I learned a lot of things. I enjoyed motorsports, and I'm still here and still enjoy it. I haven't got Paul's 70 years under his belt, but I got 60-some. And loved it so much I moved here. And if that isn't silly, I don't know what is. We left Florida for 2 or 3 years, and we're still here after 30-some years. So what can I say? It's people like you that keep me, and in my opinion, IndyCar racing is a professional sport. So is the NFL, so is Major League Baseball, so is the NBA. You hear about some of those participants in jail for one reason or another. IndyCar, I only know of 3 guys or 4 that have been in trouble, and 2 of them went to jail. 3 of them went to jail. One I think is still there, but I'm not sure. But that's it. After 60 years, that's it. And the interesting thing I always found, before I got here, I used to go to short tracks. And there'd be a race, and somebody would hit somebody, and there'd be a little discussion in the pit area, and they'd go after each other, sometimes with 2x4s. But you get to the motel where they're staying, they're trading parts to put on their cars to go race against each other that night. Never understood it.
So Dick, did you have, 1 year, how many cars have you had in a race, the most cars?
7.
7 race cars. What year was that?
Out of 33, let's see, we had 93, we had 5, 5 in 1993 and 7 in 1995. Yeah.
You know what, man? We wouldn't have had a full field if it wasn't for Dickie. Absolutely, man. He saved the bacon for the Speedway, no doubt.
One of the things that I'm proud of our team put more rookies in the Indy 500 than any team in history. I lost track of 20 when we passed 20 rookies, and 2 of them were girls, Janet Guthrie and Lyn St. James. And basically, every rookie we took to the track qualified. Not one missed the race. And last night I mentioned one of the things I was really proud of is when Rodger Penske with Little Al and world champion missed the race. And we put 2 rookies in and 3 seasoned drivers. And you know, when you look at when we sat on the front row, Penske's cars had 20 million apiece for sponsorships that year. And you know, I'll just tell you how the system sometimes works against you. And basically, we're sitting there with Raul Boesel on the front row at the Indy 500, only 1.5 or 2/10 away from the pole position. The other 2 cars were Rodger Penske. So we robbed him of having 3 cars on the front row again at that time, and he wanted to kill me because he was thinking he was going to have 3 on the front row. Then we put Lyn on the outside of the second row ahead of 3 world champions. Now, the next race that we went to, Raul finished, by the way, after 3 black flags, he finished 4th. And that was another race we should have won. I won't go into that story. But nevertheless, we went to Milwaukee. We set a track record with Raul, 5 miles an hour faster than ever before any car, ahead of all those teams. And the next day, in the paper, Milwaukee Times, it had on the sports section the whole front page. What's wrong with this picture? On the left side, Kmart, sponsorship, 20 million. Team owner, Carl Haas. On the right side, sponsorship, Duracell, 3 million. Driver, Raul Boesel, no salary, 0. What I paid Raul was a high percentage. And I said, we don't have anything else, and you'll make more on the high salary, on the high percentage than, you know, we do it any other way. So he was okay with that. But the newspaper put 0 for what his income. Over here, guess what it was for Carl Haas? Nigel Mansell, 3 million a year. What's wrong with this picture? 5 miles an hour faster? Well, here to tell you a story that I don't want to get myself in trouble, because one of the things I do is I love to see success out of no matter who it is. And I have to say, Rodger's one of the smartest people I ever met in racing. He knows how to get it all done, and he knows how to win. And the people along the way just can't keep up with some of his stuff. You asked me a question earlier.